What's happening, guys? Thanks for coming to this video. We're going to be looking at hands this week. We're going to be applying the 3 rules of learning anatomy, which if you don't remember, if you haven't seen that video, the 3 rules that I talked about for learning anatomy were 1, to use reference, 2, to draw shapes, not people, or in this case, it would be draw shapes rather than just a hand straight ahead, and to practice, right? So that was from our last video, and we're going to be keeping those rules in mind as we jump into hands and we start breaking down some hand studies and some tips and tricks that I've picked up along my creative journey to be able to draw hands more consistently. So let's get started. Also, really quickly, I just wanted to give an update and say that I was able to clutch myself a top 10 position in the Manga Plus Creators manga competition from last month for my title, Starfire Helios. So that's pretty great. Thank you for everybody who were able to support me on that. And I have now dropped my Chapter 2 on the same website on Manga Plus Creators, which I'm going to leave a link in the description for, so you can go check that out as well and see the continuation of the story. All right, so let's start out this video by asking ourselves a question. Why hands? As hard as they are, because they are quite difficult, why is it worth it to master hands as an artist? There are, after all, relatively successful artists out there that have avoided hands by cutting them out of the frame or hiding them behind other things and can still put together a pretty visually impressive drawing. But I want you to consider this, so before we actually start learning how to draw hands, let's just look at these 3 drawings. I did 3 quick sketches of characters, and I have a version of them without hands in the frame, and then I have the same drawing but with hands in the frame. So take a look at the drawings without the hands. You know, you look at the characters and they do have expressions, right? There's expressions on their faces and you get a level of emotion from them. But what do you know about the characters, right? Just as an exercise, I'm not gonna go through this, but just think about can you pick up, what can you deduce about these characters just based off of these images? And now I'm going to flip it to the hands drawings where the hands are included. What differences do you notice? So is there more that you can figure out about maybe what they are or what they do just by including hands in there, or about what their emotional state is? So as humans, we use our hands for so much. And among these things is expression, right? Hands are hugely important to expression. Hands can be just as telling of a person's mood as their face at times. So learning hands is essential to achieving a deeper level of expression and emotion in your art, which is so essential to visual storytelling. So here we are. I've got my digital canvas pulled up with some hand sketches that I did prior to recording, so we can just get in here and break it down. So before we start drawing hands with some dynamism or in poses or stuff like that, we need to be able to break down the hand in what I call the flapjack position, which is just the flat hand. We need to be able to break down the structure of the hand at this simple angle before we can start manipulating it, because it's best as an artist if you're understanding what you're drawing. It gives you more freedom to manipulate it the way you want and to achieve unique and interesting hand poses in your drawings. So let's come right in here. So we got our 2 flapjack hands, one from the palm side and one from the backhand side. And we're just going to look at this. So this is drawn in a more natural position, right? This is a natural looking hand. And notice there are a few things I want you to notice. When a hand looks natural, just notice how there is a slight curve to every finger pointing upwards to the middle finger. And that is noticeable both on the palm side and on the backhand side. Naturally, when we're just sitting there, normally our fingers do kind of go inwards a little bit, right? So that's just something to keep in mind. And then also, one thing that I wanted to look at here is the palm. So the palm, I like to divide it into 3 parts. And I do have I have three creases here in the middle of the palm that sort of delineate these three parts of the palm. The first part of the palm is this right here. This is part one. This is sort of the thumb bulge. So this is a big bit of muscle in the palm, and it's the bulkiest part of the palm, right below the thumb. And then over here, we've got part two, which is the pinky side of it. And it doesn't bulge out as much as the thumb, but it does have some bulge. It does have some volume to it, which you have to keep in mind when you start drawing it at a side. Like if you're drawing a fist and we're seeing the side of the fist where the pinky is, we need to see a little bit of volume from that number two part of the palm. And then there's the flat bit up top, right up here. This is sort of the flat fold part that leads up into the fingers, and that has hardly any volume to it, hardly any muscle in there. It's mostly just tendons. All right, so coming over to this side, I've got a flat hand. I've got a flapjack hand with the thumb extended here that I'm going to use to break down the structure of a hand even further. So getting into this, first thing I want you to notice is that the distance here, right? So basically where the fingers meet the palm, and the distance here, basically the top of the palm down to where the palm connects to the wrist, those are equal, right? Those should be basically the same length. Nothing looks worse when you're drawing hands. Nothing looks worse than if you don't leave enough space for your palm. I used to do this a lot, and I have some old drawings that it looks like the fingers come directly out of the wrist almost. And that just looks gross. It looks unnatural. And it's a big sign of sort of an amateur artist. So pay attention to that, right? Pay attention to having these lengths be just about equal. Okay, and you can notice on this, we still have the three parts of our palm here, right? Number one there, number two, and number three, the flat part. But I want to break down the natural curvature of the natural arch that the fingers create. So all of the fingers up here, so all of the fingers excluding the thumb, should be divided into three sections, right? So it should look something like this. So these are sections. This is the first section, the very top section, and then we draw another line around here, which should give us our 2 and our 3. 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3. Okay. The thumb, however, from where the knuckle is, there's actually only 2 sections. So 1 here and then 2 right here. And that's it. Okay. However, what I want you to notice is that there is a curve, there is an arch that all the fingers should follow, right? That goes like this, up and down. And notice that the middle finger is obviously the longest. The ring finger and index finger are about the exact same length normally. And then the pinky lines up with the division. The pinky lines up with the division between the first and second sections of the ring finger. So it is quite a bit shorter. It's significantly shorter. And the arch, so this arch that we can follow along the tops of all the fingers, should be uniform throughout the entire hand, where we've got an arch at the very top of the fingers, and then we've got the same arch following all the section, like the dividers basically of the sections of the fingers, all the way down to where the fingers connect to the palm. And that arch should always be uniform and present. And you got to keep those lengths of those fingers in mind when you're drawing fingers on your hands at different angles and such. Because it's noticeable, right? Whatever hand pose you're drawing, it's going to be noticeable if one of the fingers is too long or too short, right? So just keep that arch in mind. Keep the length of those fingers in mind. All right, so applying our rule of drawing shapes, not people, to hands, Very specifically, something that I found extremely useful to help me create my hand poses is to think of the hand as a box, okay? So I got this right here. Whoops. I've got this right here where you can see I've just drawn a 3D little, I guess it's like a rectangle, right? And with the 4 circles indicating where the fingers are going to come out of the palm. But at any angle, when I'm going to draw a hand, I love to just draw a box. So that way I can think of the hand in 3D and remember to leave enough space and enough volume for the palm, because the palm does have muscle on it and it does take up volume. Drawing a box first really helps you with that, right? So when I come over here and I just drew this little hand pose with the finger sticking down, whatever, right? Any hand pose, I can come on here and I can look at my planes, right? So let's say the red right here is going to be my backhand, right? And then green is going to be pinky side of the hand. And let's just say that blue is over here on this side. So when I come over here, I can think of my plane. So this is my thumb side. So I've got like a box right here that I can just fill in. And that is one plane in my 3D space, right? Actually, let's just see if I can fill it like that. That looks better. So yeah, that's one plane. And then on my red, this right here is another plane, right? That is my backhand. And then, oh, I didn't actually do that one. Let's just say yellow. Whoops. So let's just say the front part of my hand is, let's just say it's yellow, right? So then on over here, this would be this plane, right? In a 3D space, I've got my fingers, and obviously this finger that's coming out doesn't stay within that plane because it is coming out, but all the other fingers fall into that. And so you can see that I can project this box onto a finished hand, and that's how I start off my hand drawings. I draw that box to know where my planes are. It makes it so much easier to construct your hands competently. So get comfortable doing that exercise. Get to the point where you feel really confident that you can construct a natural looking flapjack hand without using reference, right? And then once you're there, we're going to go ahead and move on to some hand poses. Before we jump into hand poses though, I want you to consider the following things. In most poses, fingers pair up. So meaning they stay closer together. Often the index and middle fingers will pair up or stay closer together, and the pinky and ring pair up. However, any combination of pairs is possible. And any one finger could be isolated, though it's most common for the index to be the loner. Basically, to simplify this, just vary the size of gaps between your fingers for more natural looking poses. Extremely uniform gaps between fingers is less natural, depending on the pose. And then also consider this, the second thing I wanted to make note of is that anytime fingers are curving, the curve gradually increases from the index to the pinky so that the index is the least curved and the pinky the most curved. That is most always the case. And obviously there are exceptions to these, but just if you feel like your hand poses don't look natural, consider these things. Okay, so the first pose we're going to look at is an open, relaxed hand to the side of your character. So this is the most useful hand pose that you can learn to draw, where the hand is just resting open on the side of a character. And guess what? This pose is what we just drew, basically. Just at a side angle, pretty much. So the hardest part of this pose is the overlapping because there's so much of it going on here. So when you're dealing with this much overlapping, it's best to think of the object in layers and draw the front layer first. So what is in our front layer? So if your hand is just resting to your side and we're looking at a front view straight at the character, what is in front of, what is the front layer of your hand? Well, it's the thumb and the index finger, right? The thumb and the index finger are very visible when your hand is in this position, whereas the other fingers are all tucked back behind. So that's what we're going to draw first. We're going to draw our thumb and our index finger. So take note that the thumb comes straight down and the index finger curves slightly towards the thumb to shape almost like an oval window between them. And the thumb comes out from the palm because of the muscle bulge, right? So when the hand is just resting naturally, where the rest of the fingers are, the thumb is forward a little bit because there's a lot of muscle right there in that muscle, in that thumb bulge. And then inside the oval window between your index and your thumb fingers, so now that you have your front layer drawn, inside that oval window you can add other fingers, which follows the same curve as the index finger, with each consecutive finger curving slightly more. Now on to our second pose, the fist. So the next most useful hand pose to learn is the fist. Lots of artists find this pose much easier to draw, and thus it is a popular one. But there are things you can adjust or add to make your fists a cut above the competition. The curve of your fingers is dictated by the thumb muscle bulge because it is so huge. So basically, because that thumb muscle is so big, it leaves less room for the fingers that are closer to it so that they can't curl into the palm as much. The result is this. The index finger protrudes the most from a closed fist, and the pinky the least. So look at this side angle of a fist, and notice how the index finger sticks out a lot more. That's because of that muscle bulge. Outside of that, it all comes down to definition. So practice defining knuckles as they should be quite large in a fist. They're sort of very exposed in a fist position. And study and practice natural creases. Note, while a useful hand pose, a pointed index finger pose is so similar to the closed fist that pretty much I'm just going to be including it in this along with the fist pose. On to our third pose now. This is open extended. So our hand is open and we have our fingers extended outward. An extended open hand is often used when a character is gesturing towards something or making a declaration of some kind. It's very useful to practice. On this pose, finger gaps can be more uniform. Also, your fingers can actually curve backwards slightly when fully extended. And take note that this backwards arch is really noticeable when you have foreshortening, right? When you look at something straight on and it has a sort of an arch, it's more subtle. But if that thing is pointing towards you, then all of a sudden the arch looks really big. And with extended fingers, one thing that I do want you to notice is that the last section of the thumb can actually hyperextend backwards a lot more than the fingers can. And this is something that a lot of artists will show in their drawings, where the thumb is sort of coming straight up, but then that last section of the finger almost shoots backwards because the thumb can do that, whereas the other fingers can't. This last pose is really commonly used with foreshortening, where the hand is pointing outward towards the viewer, and thus it is a perfect segue into foreshortening hands. So I'm going to give you a couple of tips for foreshortening. First is that it is easier to do when you start drawing what is in front first. I have found this time and time again. Whenever I'm foreshortening any part of a body, and hands are included in this, I find it much easier to nail when I draw what's in front first. And then I'll find a way to connect it back to what's in back after that. Number two, it's easy to get excited with the size disparity between what's in front and what's in back. So keep yourself in check in this regard. Also, hashtag digital art supremacy, because digital art has the selection tool where you can snag something and resize it however you want. And there have been so many times where I've done foreshortening where I have fallen into this trap where what's in front is too big compared to what's in back. And I'm able to just make a quick fix by selecting that, whatever's in front, and resizing it. So yeah, digital art rocks. Number three is that things that were distant appear close together when foreshortened. So things like creases, wrinkles, buttons, patterns on clothing, etc. Right? If they look kind of far away when you're just looking at, for example, an arm. If I've got patterns on my clothing, on my sleeve, that look kind of like there's some space between them, when I'm just looking at the arm straight on. Well, when it's foreshortened, those things are going to look like they're right next to each other or practically touching each other, right? And then number 4 is that some things are just straight up hidden, okay? Avoid trying to show everything. And this is where the shapes rule comes into play, because if you do use shapes, it's easier to take note of what is going to be hidden in your final drawing. Because yeah, when you're foreshortening things, some things are going to be covered and it's going to look better. The final drawing is going to look better if you do it that way. And yeah, don't forget that you can use photo reference to bail you out. Is a pose too hard? You've erased so many times that your paper's all smudged up nasty? Hashtag digital art supremacy. Take a picture and move along. If you're consistent, hands will begin to click in your mind. You'll unlock an understanding of the structure of hands so thoroughly that you'll just conjure up awesome expressive hand poses far beyond what we've looked at here. And when you do get to that point, nothing will feel better. You'll join the league of hand addicts. You'll want hands in all of your drawings. It's super fun, I promise you. When you get pretty good at hands, and I don't even think I'm there at like full mastery, but I'm already getting to that point where I just find drawing hands extremely fun, and I'm always finding excuses to put hands in my drawings. So in the meantime, I hope this video was useful to you guys, and I hope it'll push you along that journey towards hand dominance. Thanks for tuning in, friends, and happy creating.